Greetings, everyone. And get rid of this banner here and make sure that we are live on Instagram too. How is everybody doing? Welcome to another live chat. I'll let some of you join. If you are joining from Facebook profile page, Instagram here rather, let me know where you're from. That's always how we kick it off. Felipe in the house of World Salsa Radio, which is also where we're hosting. I got to talk to you. I have a new podcast out, which I'll be telling all you about it as well. But maybe we can host that on World Salsa Radio as well. That comes out on Tuesdays. And hi, Manuel. Again, wherever you're joining from, let me know your city, country, wherever that may be. Mr. Basar, Turkey, merhaba. What was welcome in again? Hoş geldin. Wade in the house from Queens, New York with a coffee at hand. I've got water. I finished my coffee already. I realized that I need to drink the coffee early in the day before noon, unless I don't if I don't want to be wired all night. Stacy from Los Angeles, California. Very cool. Adrian from Costa Rica. Can't remember if you and I were chatting about the issues between kind of self-confidence or not in chat. But if we were, I'm glad you actually made it to today's live chat, because that is what we're going to be diving deep into. All right. Again, always a challenge with Instagram. Omaha, Nebraska. I didn't know that you were in Nebraska all this time. I thought you were in Texas, Manuel. Anyways. Adrian. Okay, fantastic. I'm glad you made it. So for those of you joining today for the first time, or if you're joining again, this is your second or multiple time joining these live chats, I'm Magna Gopal. If you don't know who I am, I have been in the salsa dance industry for over 20 years, traveling and teaching around the world. I've also gotten into public speaking and mindset coaching, empowerment coaching. And these live chats, which I do on a monthly basis now, are here to serve my community, which is all of you. And there are so many topics that are really, really important for our personal development, our growth, our ability to learn, our ability to enjoy ourselves, express ourselves authentically, that don't get covered. Or we end up discussing them kind of in a very personal fashion in little conversations that we have with our friends, but we don't really get to dive deep into those things. And in dance workshops, for those of you who are dancers, when you attend a workshop, most of the time, the focus is on dance techniques or dance movements, and we don't often get to delve into the mindset that is required to truly succeed at whatever it is that we're pursuing. So these live chats are for that purpose. And the reason I do them is because I get tons and tons of questions from my students, from my coaching clients that I know are going to benefit you if you have a chance to hear those answers too. And if in any of this process, today's live chat or in the past live chats, if there's something that has resonated with you, please take a moment to share. Right? It's a really simple way to broadcast the message and to help other people, just like you might have found some assistance with this live chat today yourself. So a couple more hellos. You moved 2 years ago. Gotcha. Okay. Again, if you're joining, let me know where you're joining from. Debbie in the house, Florida. Marcia, where are you joining from? Lenny's from Mexico City. Beautiful city. Great street tacos. Probably one of the best. Who else do we have here? On Instagram. So again, this live chat is broadcasted across multiple platforms, on YouTube, on my Facebook profile, Facebook page, as well as Instagram. So if you see me looking side to side, it's because I'm on multiple devices making this happen to make it as convenient as possible to all of you. The replays, if you cannot stay for the entire live chat, I used to say that I would do this within about 30 minutes or so. That's always the goal, was to do it within 30 minutes. But some of these topics just require more attention and more discussion. And so we might go 60 minutes, 90 minutes, who knows how long. They have gone long. So if you cannot stay for the entire time, that is perfectly okay. The replay is going to be available on YouTube, so you can always go and check that out. And eventually, when I have time to get around to it, the replays are also timestamped, so it's easier for you to follow the discussion or to jump to areas of the live chat that you feel are more relevant to what it is that you want to actually get out of that particular live chat. And as always, feedback is important. You will understand this feedback comment a little bit later as well. But as it pertains to these live chats, I always have the feedback form, magnagopal.com/feedback. If you go to my website, there's a contact page. There's multiple feedback forms there, but there's one for the live chat specifically. I always request that you guys take some time to complete it, not just because I would like to know what you learned from it. I would like to understand if it benefited you in any way, if you got some new insights, if it would change the way you approach life, learning, dancing, expressing yourselves, any of those things. But more importantly, it is a way to revisit what you actually absorbed in this live chat and to kind of reframe it in your own words. And that's one of the ways, which we'll discuss later, one of the ways to enhance your personal learning experience, which is not just to consume, but to also reframe in your own words and make it your own. And one of the ways to do that is to tell somebody else what exactly it is that you learned. In this case, you would be telling me, which I already know because I told you, but I don't know what you learned from the process. I don't know what you're getting out of it. That is going to be a uniquely individual experience that I will never know unless you share that with me. So I always invite you to complete those feedback forms. If you are on Facebook or on YouTube watching this live chat, if you just go down into the description, you'll see a link to that. A couple more hellos here. Marsha's from New Jersey. Gita from Chicago. Felipe is in Oakland, California. Was just in Hawaii. Ben from Oslo. Very cool. New episode. Fernando enjoys the episode of Naked and Counting. Thank you. I'm so glad you're enjoying that. Speaking of which, for those of you who are following me on YouTube or on Instagram, I do have a new podcast. You cannot see this frame on Instagram, but if you check my profile, you'll see it there. I wonder if this works well. Let's see. Hold on. StreamYard has some features. Boom. Wait, where is it? Right there. Empowered with Magna podcast. So for those of you who've been following these live chats or my Naked and Counting podcast that I host with my co-host, Leon Rose, also famous in the dance scene, a very accomplished dancer. Empowered with Magna is a new podcast that I've just released. There are 3 episodes that are available right now. You can find it anywhere you listen to podcasts, Spotify, Apple, Google, Amazon Music, wherever you listen to Spotify. And this is just my way of sharing bite-sized tips, because again, these live chats go quite long sometimes, an hour, hour and a half. These are smaller tips where I could extract a specific answer to a specific question or a certain message that relates to a specific topic. That's 5 to 10 minutes or so in length. That way you can just see that, click that, listen to that. And of course, the video option isn't there, but it's an easy way to consume that information and process it and apply it into your life without having to, have your phone on and look at it or be at your laptop or your TV to watch it. You can listen to it anywhere. So Empowered with Magna, that's MPOWERED with Magna. You can look it up anywhere you listen to podcasts. Okay, so make sure you check that out. And if you do, and if you like the episodes, if you find that they bring some type of value to your life, please click subscribe and leave a rating. There are very simple ways to support the people that bring value to your life. Of course, if you want to donate on Instagram, I think you can click on something to send a badge to support. On YouTube and Facebook, if you scroll down, there is a Ko-fi link. Coffee. I should just send them a message and ask them, how do you pronounce this properly? But Ko-fi, Ko-fi link, that if you want to support this channel, if you want to support these efforts of me putting this kind of content out here, you can just click there and leave a donation if you like. Little gift that will buy me my next cup of coffee. So that's one update that I'd like to share with you. The other update is my Master Your Multiples program, which has just completed, actually, our second cohort. The third opening for registration is coming up soon. So if you want to check that out, if that's something that you are interested in terms of developing your spin technique, which ultimately not only improves your technique for spins, but improves it for literally everything else, because everything you gain from understanding your balance, your momentum, how to create, generate, control, and stop your momentum applies to dance in general. So if you want to check that out and get on the wait list for when it is launched, because it will be limited enrollment, there is personalized bi-weekly coaching calls that happen with all of my students that are enrolled. I don't have that much time, so I cannot take on that many students. So if you want to check that out, go to spins.magnagopal.com or just visit my website to the on-demand section, and you can see all the courses that are available that you can purchase on your own to follow at your own pace. And you should see a link for the waitlist for the Master Your Multiples program as well. So that should be opening hopefully sometime in July. Of course, I'll post some information about that on my social media. But if you're on here right now and this is something you want to check out, put your name on the wait list, because that is going to go by really quickly. With that said, let's go back to a couple more introductions. All right. Just came here. Okay. Again, if you're joining for the first time or repeat, let me know where you're from so I can give you a little shout out and share my appreciation that you are here. With that, let's get into today's topic. The title of today's topic is Enhancing Your Learning Experience. All right, it's getting the most of our learning experience despite all the multiple challenges that are out there, right? There's time, there's the environment, there's your flexibility, your budget, all of those things. But there's a bigger obstacle. And the reason I'm doing this topic today is because of an experience that I recently had in my classes, a specific workshop actually, that made me think, how are students actually approaching learning? How are we all approaching learning? Because it's not just about if you're going into a dance class to learn dance moves or anything like that. It is literally every single aspect of your life, right? We are learning from those things. We can be learning from those things, but it really depends on our attitude. So those internal obstacles that are present are ego, mindset, attitude, and clarity. So I'm going to ask all of you who are present. Feel free to answer in the chat. You can also answer in the feedback form at the end of the live or whenever you have time. But I'm curious, have you ever attended a class or workshop where you felt like you didn't learn much? I'm sure we all have, but I'm just curious if the people that are currently present have felt that, where you've attended a class or workshop, and it could be dance, it could be anything, but where you've attended a class or a workshop where you feel like you haven't learned much. And I have to remember that there is a lag in streaming between by the time you hear what I just asked to the time you write and then I see it. Okay, so hands up here. All right. I think we all have. Okay. Now, question for reflection. You can answer in the chat if you want to, but what do you think contributed to that? Like, if you felt like you didn't learn much in that class, what do you think contributed to that? So Gita said, maybe when the instructor is speaking in length about something not to do with dance or technique at all, but personal achievements or jokes. That does contribute. Yep. Okay. I'm going to go through my experience as well, but that's a common one. I have seen that in some workshops where there's a lot of jokes happening and you're not really getting the quality of the information or the instruction, or it's just a pat on the instructor's back. Like they're giving themselves a pat on the back through the entire workshop, which is annoying. I totally get that one. Wade said, to the point that I don't know how many times. Touche. Um, so the next question I have is, do you think you yourself were doing everything to maximize your learning experience through that process? Because when we're in class, when we're in workshops, there's this assumption that takes place that us being present in a learning environment is sufficient for our growth, right? Where we think that, well, I'm here, I'm taking class, I took time out of my schedule, I paid for this, I am here, so I'm doing everything that is necessary to grow and to learn. And many of us attend classes thinking that, but it's much more than that, right? Because ultimately, it is not just about showing up, but it's also about how you're showing up. What are you actually bringing to that learning environment to maximize what you can get from it? Because a big part of learning is not even what is being taught, because many of the moments that teach, like that we learn from in life, are not moments where someone is actually actively teaching us, right? How many experiences have you had in your life where you're like, wow, that was a learning experience? I made an investment, a very poor financial investment, because I didn't do the research. That person wasn't teaching me anything, right? Specifically, they weren't saying, hey, Magna, you're going to pay this and you're going to lose this. And this is how I'm going to teach you how to properly assess your investment. That wasn't what was happening, but I learned from it regardless, right? So, not every experience that's a learning experience actually involves someone actively teaching you. So, we can still extract so much from those moments without a teacher. And yet, when we end up in a classroom environment where we actually have a teacher, I feel like we are more passive than we are in life outside of it. When this is the best moment, because not only are we in a space that we could learn from, whether the person was teaching or not, but we actually have an active teacher, someone who is there to guide our journey, to help us learn. But what are we actually doing with that moment, right? I just want to see a comment here by Felipe. I have, but there's always something you can learn, a different way to do a step, or understanding music in a different way. But I feel you always are learning something. Yeah, that exactly points to what I was just saying, right? We can always learn something. So I'm going to start with my personal experience. I recently taught a workshop, a social dancing workshop. This was a new one for me personally, because I've done lots of workshops, I've done lots of seminars, and this particular school in New Jersey, Afinke, wanted a social dancing workshop. They said, well, why not learn from one of the best social dancers? I said, okay. So here I went, outlined my workshop. I let them know that there would be some dancing, but there's a lot of mindset and kind of seminar style that would be my approach to this workshop. So in the workshop, we had a huge discrepancy in numbers in terms of leads and follows. So we weren't able to dance as much as I would have liked to. We had to just rotate a lot. But in this workshop, I remember there was a moment where I had asked all my leaders to do a traveling crossbody lead. Then I walked around and I was giving everybody feedback to the leads as well as the followers. And I noticed that no one was doing a traveling crossbody lead. And so I stopped the class and I asked, I gave a couple of pointers first. And then I asked, raise your hand. How many people here know what a traveling crossbody lead is? Nobody raised their hand. Okay. Nobody raised their hand. But we had just spent a couple of minutes practicing them executing this movement. But nobody raised their hand when they did not know what the hell that movement was. And so I addressed it as one, partial responsibility on my part to assume that a common term that I've heard and that I've used, everybody knows. And this actually pertains to my live chat from number 26, so the last one, which was about clarity, right? Seeking definition and clarity and making sure you define, don't make assumptions. So I admitted that. I said, listen, I made this assumption today, assuming that you all know what a traveling crossbody lead is, instead of saying it and then defining it and then having you do the exercise. But the personal responsibility, the agency on the student's part to actually say, excuse me, Magna, I don't know what you mean by that. Could you please explain it or demonstrate it? Nobody asked this. Everybody just went right into the movement without knowing that they don't know. And this happens much more than I'd like to say it does, but it happens a lot. And in lots of my workshops, I might say something or I might describe something, and people are like, yeah, I got that. I know that, in their head, but they really don't. And no one's asking the questions. Okay. I don't know if you've had this experience yourself. So if you are students, if you've taken classes, have there been moments in your learning environment, your learning experience, where the teacher has said something and you haven't raised your hand to clarify when you personally did not understand? And if so, why? Why did you not raise your hand? I have a couple of reasons for that. Personally, I will address them in a minute. The second issue that came out of this social dancing workshop was the feedback forms. As I mentioned, I have feedback forms for everything because it's not just a way for me to grow as an instructor, as a coach, to make sure that I can bring something of value and to know what of those things that I am presenting are of value and what could I adjust and improve upon. But it's also for my students to recap whatever it is that they learned, right? Now, in my feedback forms, including for the live chat, which as I mentioned, the link is in the description for YouTube and Facebook. And if you are just listening, go to the contact page on my website, magnagopal.com, and you will find a link to that. But in these feedback forms, the goal is for you to summarize what it is that you learned, what it is that you took away. It's not just to let me know. It's for you to be able to process the information in your own words and recap, right? Summarization is a huge step in our learning, in how we process information, in how we make that information applicable to us individually. And we don't do enough of that. So the feedback forms are an option for this. And one of the comments I had received on the feedback form was that they were expecting more social dancing. Okay. Expecting more social dancing. They were not expecting to be like listening to kind of lecture seminar style moments within this workshop. They're expecting just to be dancing through the entire thing. Actually, both of the comments were similar to that, but one of them said, well, I wish that the workshop was closer to the stated objective. This was curious to me because I said, stated objective. I had clearly stated to the school what the objective of the class was and what we would be doing in the class, which was, yes, we'll be dancing, there will be movements, but this is a class about understanding the mindset that allows you to enjoy social dancing, connecting with another person. And there's much more to that experience in here than there is in your body. It's like 80% a mental thing, a mental approach, a mindset, and an attitude. And 20% is like technique. So I had already expressed that. The flyers that were circulated to promote the workshop also said that. And then in the beginning of my workshop, I started by saying what this workshop is going to entail, specifically saying that there will be some dancing, but we're going to be processing how we think about things. So in this feedback form, what I realized is that this particular student did not completely either understand or process what was actually said and presented. So they were blocked in some way to receiving that information. And that could be their own biases coming into play. When I take a dance workshop, I expect to be dancing, right? And regardless of what the instructors tell me, regardless of what the flyer has promoting, I'm still going to go in there and expect what I expect and not have an open mind to what I could get from this that's different from all of the workshops that I do take, where it might just be dancing. Then the other feedback that was very similar to this, which was, oh, I wish there was more dancing. I was able to communicate with this student directly because I know them. So I sent a message and said, I'm curious, how much do you think social dancing is about your moves and how much do you think it's about mentality? And this person said it's all mentality. So how do you expect to be in a class that is there designed to make you think differently about connection, about movement, about your responsibility in a partnered dance relationship if all you want to do is move and not think, right? So let me just address a couple of comments that I just got here. Manuel said, it's scary to speak up and draw the attention to just you. Social anxiety, a lot of times. Absolutely. Then Kay said, I have not asked a question at times. Have waited until the end of class to clarify, to not interrupt classes or slow down anyone else. Interesting point. I do hope I remember that as I go through today's outline, because both of you mentioned something here that I don't think you realize how important your questions are, and how important they are, especially when there's time to ask questions. In my classes, I always have moments where I'm like, are there any questions? Is there anything you'd like me to clarify? Is there anything you'd like me to break down further? Would you like me to repeat something? I always ask these questions. Most of the time, no one raises their hand. Once in a while, someone might say, oh, please repeat that. I hear it. I attend to you. When you ask questions, you get the attention that you want. You get the clarification that you need so that you can grow. Otherwise, if you are going to wait until the end of the class, imagine how many other pieces of information and instruction are being added over that foundation of lack of clarity, right? So here you are in your process of learning through this particular class. You don't understand something. You're thinking, I'm going to wait until the end of this class to ask this question. And so you're waiting, but it's not like the rest of the class and the information that the instructor is providing is going to be waiting for you to get this clarification. So now you're getting all of this extra information. Your foundation of understanding from the very beginning is weak because you didn't get that clarification. And now you're adding all these other things on top of that, which aren't going to help you any further, right? So you could have been learning all of this better if you just asked this question at the beginning, as soon as you felt the need for that clarification, right? In addition to that, there's at the end of the class moment, that is also an element of respect for time. This is not what we're going into today specifically, but I believe I've discussed this in the past, that, if you have an instructor there to teach you for a certain amount of time, let's just imagine that this instructor has back-to-back classes. You're there. At what point do you think that instructor is going to be able to address your question? If you are going to wait until the end, which is now cutting into the instructor's time to teach another workshop, which is cutting into the time for other students to learn whatever it is that's coming up. By you waiting, you're not doing anyone any service, any good. The best time to ask is when that question pops into your head. Maybe you could give it a minute to see if it gets answered in the next sentence or next movement or something like that. But if it does not, the best thing to do is to address it immediately. And to touch upon both those points that I just mentioned, the comments that I mentioned, you're not in, like, you might feel like it's an interruption in the class, but ultimately you are providing a service. Your questions, when you ask questions, when you need clarity, you are providing a service because you are allowing that instructor to expand. You are allowing for greater clarity for everybody in the class. Just like you might feel that social anxiety to ask a question, imagine how many other people are in the class that are also feeling that nervousness to ask something. And maybe they all have that same question, but no one's raising their hand. And by you taking that initiative and raising your hand and asking that question, now you have provided a service by giving that clarity to everybody else there as well. So don't diminish the importance of your question, of your need for clarity. It helps everyone. It helps you for sure, because you're now laying that foundation of understanding, which then can be built upon by the rest of the information that comes into the classroom. But you're also allowing the instructor to reframe, rephrase, find new ways to explain, which improves the instructor's ability to teach something. And you are providing a service to the other students in the classroom who also might not understand the same thing but have not raised their hand. So you're giving voice to many people by asking a question. Now, don't ever diminish that, and don't ever feel like you're interrupting. There are times and places to ask a question, of course, while the instructor is talking. Maybe not a good time to interrupt, but by all means, you could raise your hand when you're called upon, ask a question, because clearly that was a time dedicated to you when the instructor said, yes, what's your question? You have your hand up. What would you like to know? Let me just attack some of the comments here. All right, we got some people from Puerto Rico in the house too. Gita said, many instructors always ask any questions every 10 minutes or so, which helps, and I do ask. That's amazing. Secret Garden Bay, when the instructor is open for questions, ask because others have the same questions. Absolutely, exactly what I'm saying. Wade said, from my experience, the instructors focus more on your feelings during class, giving you what you want and not what you really need, avoiding getting the student and their ego offended. Interesting. If you could provide a more detailed example of that, not specific people per se, but maybe exactly an example of what happened, that might help me understand that a little bit better. I think I have an idea of what you're saying, Wade, but I'm not entirely clear, and I don't want to misinterpret that and start talking about something that's not what you were saying. Okay. So again, you see, asking questions. I don't know. So I'm going to get clarity before I start talking for no reason. Right. All right. So again, if you are joining, please let me know where you're joining from. Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, wherever you are logged in from, let me know where you're joining from so I can give it a little shout out. Moving on to this this problem that we have, right? This creating a growth mindset and these obstacles to our learning. Because again, like I said, it's not just about taking classes and showing up, it's about how you show up. And some of the things that impact the way we show up include our ego, right? We don't want to damage our ego. That's social anxiety. Those are our fears and our insecurities of standing out, looking like the one person that doesn't know something. And we don't want to have that judgment placed upon us. And the other thing is a lack of clarity, which I'll get into. So I have a couple questions for all of you who are here just to ponder. Feel free to answer them if you like into the chat. I do move quickly through the outline of things that I want to discuss, but I will attend to the chat messages if you write them in there. So for yourselves to think, to ponder, has your ego ever interfered with your ability to learn and grow? And do you even know if it has? Right? Because that ego is a tricky thing. It just kind of hovers, whispers in your ear, and you think that that thought happened in your own head, when in reality, it's like sitting there making things happen in a negative way. So, has your ego ever interfered with your ability to learn and grow? Another question is, do you have a fear of judgment? Right? Anyone mentioned the social anxiety, to stand out if you're the one person that's raising your hand and asking a question, or this fear of interrupting. And could that fear of interruption actually be a fear of standing out as well? Could it also be a fear of making mistakes when you are in a learning environment? That you don't want to stand out, you don't want to try something because you're going to make a mistake because you don't know it yet, and you're scared of how you'll appear as a result of that. And then finally, do you have a clear idea of what you are pursuing, why you're pursuing it, and the steps required to get there. I mean, many of you, like, you're like, oh, yeah, I want to dance. I want to learn salsa. Okay, that's a nice introductory way of getting into things. But now that you've gotten some basic steps, perhaps some basic understanding of the dance and the music and the timing, what's your goal? What do you really want? Because I want to learn to dance is really vague, actually, right? It's to what end? We talked, I posted a reel just recently about um, identifying the different types of goals we might have, right? Not everyone has the same goals. We don't all need to have the same goals, actually. Everything that you want to pursue is completely okay if that's what makes you happy. But are you even clear about what it is that you want to pursue? And then based on that, do you know what to do to get there? Have you taken a minute to outline those things? I'll speak personally. I didn't at first. A lot of these things that I'm sharing today, especially in these monthly live chats, is the fact that there are many steps in my personal journey that I'm talking about today as guidance to not do. I wished I had someone who was able to provide that guidance in the past. I did not. And that's okay. I learned a different way. I learned perhaps a harder way, but I have those lessons now. And so I'm sharing those with you today because if I had those back then, who knows where I could be now if I was just starting to think about things differently, if I had a plan, if I had specific goals. And even our goals, they don't have to be rigid. There's no rigidity. Just because you say, I want to do something, does not mean you are committed to that specific pursuit for the rest of your life. They can change. But if you don't have a goal, what are you doing and why are you doing it? And how would you even know if you're getting to this place of self-fulfillment and accomplishment if you can't measure, if there's no metric by which you can say, I wanted to do this and these are the steps required, I did all of these steps, I've gotten to this place. Answering a couple of comments. Oh, Alex, thank you. I got my first badge on Instagram. Again, for those of you on here, if you want to support the channel, I'm digressing a little bit from our topic today. But if you want to support the channel, if you want to support these efforts, I don't know how you view these things. And if you're not a content creator, then you might not have an idea of how much actually goes into the back end of creating these moments, right? Yes, I'm live for an hour, but it's not just sitting here and talking for an hour. I spent lots of time outlining my topic, exactly what I want to talk about, going through my experiences to see what are the most relevant to provide, setting everything up, paying for hosting platforms and all of those things. So if you do like the content, if this is your first time or if this is your repeat time, are you subscribed to the channel? That is one of the easiest free ways to support the channel. Like whatever it is that you see, comment on those things. If you think that it's relevant or if you think that the message is solid, share it with your friends. YouTube allows you to share clips as well, so you don't have to share the whole thing. If you found a small section that you really like, you could share just that clip. And of course, if you feel extra generous and want to support even more, go into the description on Facebook and YouTube. There is a link to buy a coffee and you can give me a coffee. Or if you're on Instagram, you can do the badges, which Alex just did. And I want to just say thank you for that. We had lots of great conversations about how we can improve our practice. So I appreciate that very, very much. A couple of comments here. Let me just read them real quick in my head because they are long. So Gita said, when I go for lessons, I go like a clean slate, even though I've been dancing Latin for 6 years. I don't have fear of asking questions because I've built a rapport with the Latin group and the teacher and with friends. And so it's easier to communicate. In life, you're not practicing to focus on your ego, although it's part of our human life. It can be controlled. I strongly believe in that, and I strongly support that effort. All right, instructors would avoid correcting Oh, well, gotcha. So Wade's comment before, to clarify what he had said before, the instructors sometimes avoid correcting a student because the student is having fun and enjoying the class. Correcting them would impact if they want to come back or not. Going back to the goals, right? Why are you learning? Why are you taking a class in the first place? Is it so that you can pat yourself on the back and make sure that the teachers or be in a situation where a teacher is just constantly giving you empty praise to stroke your ego, or are you there to learn? Right? I personally, if I'm taking any class, I'm there to learn. Feel free to correct me. Correct me multiple times. I'm open to that feedback because that's why I'm there. I don't want a pat on the back for something I didn't do right. I don't need that. I will practice instead with good technique and good form and good feedback. Um, okay, so moving on. How can we maximize our learning experience? So there are a couple of things here that I want to discuss. First thing, it starts with self-awareness. For those of you who have taken classes, think about this. Have you ever gone back, especially if you've advanced from beginner level, for example? Have you ever gone back to take a beginner class and then felt like, this is so basic. I know all of this already. Think about it yourself. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. If you want to share your thoughts and your experience, feel free to add it into the chat. The reason I ask that is because there's a difference between true self-confidence and overconfidence. And I think that many times, especially dancers who have progressed from a beginner level to intermediate, advanced, professional, performance teams, whatever the case may be, there is like an inflated sense of self in those situations where you think you know it all, right? And what we know, I would say, is just a fraction of the knowledge and information that's out there. My voice just cracked. What we know is just a fraction of the knowledge and information that is out there. Even if you have been doing it for a long time, even if you've gotten to a professional status of teaching and performing and all of those things, and you're getting paid to do it, you still have just a fraction of that knowledge. And if you can understand that, you might be able to go into a classroom setting to absorb more. I'm going to give you another personal example, a recent personal experience. So I was at a social in New Jersey, Picante Social. An instructor was there, Franklin Diaz. I'm not sure how many of you know him. Really great instructor. He's been around, I think, longer than I have. Okay. He is a fantastic dancer, very creative, very unique in how he moves and how he dances. And he has a lot of, how can I say it? Creative, unconventional movements. And he does them really, really well. So he was giving this workshop. I was there early because I went with my friend, the DJ, who has to go and set up. So we were there very, very early. And Franklin started his class, and I'm in there with an open slate, as Geeta mentioned, right? I'm in there with an open slate, wondering what I'm going to learn today. He could have, depending on what he wanted to do, have a really complex set of patterns or footwork or shines that he wanted to teach. What he ended up teaching was kind of basics, actually. It was some simple movements, side basics, forward basics, with some adjustments in the way we shift our hips and shift our weight. That's all it was. But that's what it was, right? I could look at that and say, man, this is a basics class. Like, I'm not going to take a basics class and exit. Or I could sit there complaining about it the whole time and say, oh, why didn't Franklin Diaz is Franklin Diaz? Why doesn't Franklin teach all the fancy stuff he teaches? No, that's not how I approached it. I, who have at this moment 23 years of experience in this dance, okay, 2 decades of it professionally, I'm approaching this class and saying, what can I learn? And I'm saying, he's teaching basics. How can I look at this instructor and listen to his words and try and extract as much as I can from this moment? Because this style of dancing is not the way I dance. And that absorption of information, that understanding that I don't know everything, allows me to be open to a different style. And it's not to say that I'm going to go out and start dancing and doing things the way he taught it. But for the moment that I'm there, I am 100% present as a student, as a completely beginner student trying to absorb as much as I can so that I can perform it at its best in that space. After that, if I want to take and extract some of it and use it in my own dancing, sure. If I want to say, you know what, that's not really comfortable for me, it's not really my style, I don't want to do it, sure, I can discard it all at the end if I want to. But in that moment, there's no attitude, there's no ego, there's no, oh, you know what, I've been dancing as long as you, so I know as much as you, so I'm going to have this at. No, it is a student of like humility. How much can I learn from this person who is clearly skilled at what he does? And it doesn't matter that it's the basic. It doesn't matter how much years of experience or what level people would consider me. Point is, I'm approaching it with there's so much left to learn. And this is an opportunity to learn. And so if I can do that, okay, when I have students, the ones who come in and say, oh, you know, that was easy or whatever. And those same people that are in class sitting there saying it's easy, oftentimes when I see them in workshops, they don't have it. Okay. I'm sorry. In your head, you think you got it, but you don't. And if the instructor was actually looking at you and you wanted real feedback, the instructor would probably give you 50 things to work on to improve what it is that you're doing. Because you don't have it the way you think you know it, right? There's so many things that we don't know that we think we know. And when we approach learning from a place of humility, we get so much more out of that experience. And that's important for all of us to approach. Because I, as a dancer of 23 years, with my experience, if I can step into a class with someone who is a peer in the industry with me and step into a class and humble myself in front of that person to learn as much as I can, to take his feedback, to listen to him. If he's saying something and looking at me and making a statement that's a correcting statement, I assume it's applied to me. I don't think, oh, well, clearly he can't be talking to me. I'm the best dancer here. Look at all my experience. No. In fact, everything he says to correct, I think about, is he, am I doing that too? Let me adjust. Let me check my body and make sure I'm not, or make sure I correct myself if I am. So if I can approach a learning experience with my experience in this industry specifically, with that humility, there is absolutely no reason why all of us can't. And there's definitely no reason for those dancers out there who have been dancing for a year or 2 years, who advance from beginner to advanced beginner or intermediate, to come into a class and be like, know that, oh, that's a basic class, basic steps. I already know my basics. You don't. I'm sorry. You know, like, you don't know as much as you think you know. And there is so much more to learn out there. And you will grow as an individual and as a dancer if you could just open your mind. And we have way too much closed mindedness when we approach learning. We have a fixed mindset, and that is a result of our ego. That is a result of overconfidence. That is a result of some of those fears and insecurities we might have. And that is also a result of like having clarity, right? In whatever it is that we are pursuing. What exactly do I want to do? So outlining those goals. So let's talk about the clarity element of it. This is another aspect that I did not approach this way when I first started dancing. I was just doing it and getting out there and having fun, and that was good enough for me. But now, as I see the value of time differently, I approach defining my goals and the steps required to achieve them with more purpose and more intention. So, as I had mentioned before, and also in the last live chat about definitions, for those of you who are here and for those of you watching the replay, thinking about your own goals, let's keep it to dance for now, but thinking about your own goals. Do you know what you're trying to achieve? What is the end result? The temporary end result, right? Again, you can shift that. You can shift the milestone, the marker to something else later, or completely abandon this and move on to something else as well. But do you have a goal currently? Do you have a goal that you want to pursue? And if you do, fantastic. Did you take the time to outline the steps required to get there? Because there are people who will say, I want to dance. I want to get on the dance floor and have fun. And those same people will take hours and hours of workshops and classes and maybe go out dancing once or twice a month. So if your goal is to get good at dancing, right, to be a good social dancer, how is being in a classroom, practicing with people that you probably see on a regular basis that you've gotten comfortable with, that already understand your style, that are already know what they're supposed to do because the teacher's already instructing that, and they're making adjustments and accommodations for whatever you're not actually doing properly. How is that going to improve your ability to be a good social dancer if you're not even practicing and taking it onto the dance floor? Let's say you want to be um, technically sound, right? And all you're doing is going out dancing, but you actually want the skills to be able to create something different. Like, there are different steps based on the goals. It's not all the same steps, and we're all taking kind of the same steps. We're all starting out with classes. That's good. That's a good introduction. But eventually, we need to stop and start defining for ourselves what it is that we want to do and how we can get to those things. Right? So, for example, um, with let's say with social dancing, you want to be a good social dancer. Other people want to be good at performing, and both people are going to take the same classes, learning in the same way, maybe not taking private lessons, maybe not really social dancing, right? One person is going to end up getting a different result from the same process, right? We're all going to get different results from the same process. But if we can outline exactly what goal we're trying to achieve, we can adjust that process to get the result that we actually want. And I don't think that we're spending the time to define that properly. So, one of those things is outlining your goals, being clear about it, getting that clarity. And then from there, saying, what do I need to get there? If I want to be a good social dancer, I should take classes. But I also need to take time to social dance. And then part of that outlining and planning is actually scheduling time. And not just for the class, right? Because again, I'm going to go back to the statement that I just said. We think that our learning is taking place because we are showing up in a classroom learning environment. And that is not where learning takes place. The learning is not about being in a place, in a specific location. The learning happens up here, and you have to change the way that you think about things and think about the things that are in your environment to actually learn. That is an individual internal process, learning. I cannot learn for you. I could teach you, but I cannot learn for you. You have to learn for yourself. So you have to be intentional about that moment. And again, given that time is a valuable, irreplaceable commodity, we need to be mindful of how we spend our time. And the older you get, I think maybe that's another reason why I've gotten to this place, right? The older you get, the more you realize that you just can't do everything. There are a lot of items on your plate. There are a lot more expectations and obligations on your plate. So time becomes even more limited. And now here you are pursuing a hobby, but to what end have you defined it? Right? And what time do you have to put towards it? And then you need to be realistic about whether you can achieve it, right? Or whether you need to adjust your goals based on your resources, the available resources that you have, time, effort, energy, money, etc. Because maybe you would like to pursue, for example, being on a performance team and traveling, but you have a 80-hour, 100-hour work week. Where will you train? How will you train? Or maybe you want to do those things, but your budget is tight. Performance teams require an investment, costumes, shoes, uh, rehearsal space, all of those things. Maybe you want to social dance, like that's something that you want to do, but your nighttime schedule, maybe you work all nights. Where will you get a chance to go to a social that happens in the nighttime? Most socials do, most events do, right? We have to be clear on what it is that we're trying to pursue. Outlining those goals, understanding what are the steps that are required to get there, and then understanding whether we have the resources available to us to actually pursue those goals, and if not, adjust them accordingly. Because there are many ways to pursue contentment, happiness, fulfillment, right? In the same arena. Doesn't all have to be the same, but we have to identify it. Okay, couple of comments. I would say I'm sorry for the long spiel, but I'm not. Wade says, depends on how you mold your teaching. I'm a student that would risk getting my ego hurt in order to fix and better my technique. Amen to that. I am exactly the same. Secret Garden said, going to beginner classes allows you to focus on things from a different perspective. Absolutely. And then speaking to that specific point, when you're a beginner taking beginner classes, there's something you will absorb. As you progress in your own skills and you advance to intermediate, advanced, etc., and you go back to a beginner class, you will absorb different materials, right? You are always going to learn something different, even from the same moment, even from the same instruction, even reading a book. Think about reading a book. There are books that I read when I was a teenager. I read them again later. I took something completely different from that because my life had changed. My experiences had changed. So I'm absorbing this information through a new lens. And that's what taking beginner classes or repeating classes allows us to do, is view the information from a new lens and extract information in a different way, from a different angle. Geeta said, sometimes in basic lessons, I'd volunteer to learn leading, which is still new to me. Me too. There are a lot of workshops, especially before socials, when I'm there, that I enjoy leading and I want to learn something that's different. So sometimes I take those workshops not as a follower, but as a leader, so I can learn a different style from somebody whose patterns that I actually like. Manuel said, all I know is all I know. I'm sorry, let me restart that. I know what brought me to dance classes, so I need the help and ego. And so I need the help and ego gets thrown out. If you can assess that, because that's a challenge, right? Got to know why you're there. And if you are verbally saying, I'm here to learn, but mentally saying, I know it all, then you're not going to learn anything. Or you're going to learn the wrong lessons, and you're going to come out feeling disappointed in that experience, feeling like judgmental of the instructor, or perhaps of the other students that are around you, when ultimately it is a reflection of yourself and your inability to process that information or participate, ask questions, get that clarity, get that feedback. If you have any other questions, by all means, throw your comments in to the chat. I will call them out as I see them. Adrian said, thanks for the meaningful insights. It's important to know many stories to feel related. As I started, it's difficult to know what to expect and how to improve my development. Right. And that element of when you start, you're not sure what to expect or how to improve yourself. That is okay. Like I would like to be really clear about this. I'm not saying you need to start and just be like, I've never heard of salsa, for example. We're talking about dance. Never heard of salsa before, never heard of this particular topic or this subject, but I have this goal of doing this and becoming this, and this is exactly how I'm going to pursue it. That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm expecting of you at all. I want you to start. You have a passion for something, by all means, go and pursue it. But don't pursue it passively, because you're not going to get as much as you can out of it. You can jump into it passively. You could jump into it by fluke, by chance, randomly, never knowing anything about it. That's okay. That's actually beautiful. That's how I got into dance. But eventually, you have to start identifying what it is you want to get out of it so that you can feel a personal sense of fulfillment and accomplishment, right? Okay. Let me add, continuing with my couple of tips here. So we talked about being active in the learning process, right? How are you engaging in the discussions in the classroom? Do you ask questions regularly? Are you seeking feedback? Are you providing feedback, right? Going back to feedback forms, a big part of providing feedback, again, is it requires you to process information. And how you provide feedback is also a reflection of how you process the information. Because if you have an opportunity to provide feedback, let's say with our feedback forms for my workshops or for this live chat, again, magnagopal.com, go to the contact page, the live chat Q&A feedback form is there. I would very much appreciate you taking the time to complete that properly in detail. But how you provide your feedback also tells me how you were present and how much you want to get out of it. Because things that are important to us, we put time and energy and effort into them. So if we take a class, we want to learn. If there's a feedback form, we would complete that and not just say, oh, yeah, great class. Oh, I learned a lot. Like, what did you learn? I learned a lot. I don't know what that means. Right. Instead, I would say, oh, these are all the things I learned because I'm so passionate about the topic and passionate about my personal growth with that topic, with that subject in that area that I realize my way of processing it and then presenting it to myself in my own words allows me to really drill that information into me. I benefit from that. I know that from my feedback. And so it's important to not just get that feedback, but also see where you can provide feedback. Even if it could be something that an instructor or the environment or the program could improve upon, but it could also be what you are learning, what you learned. You could go up to someone and say, you know what? I really appreciate this class because I never thought about it in this way. And just that enough, you sharing that again to the instructor, you thinking about it and saying it to yourself and then saying it out loud is allowing you to reinforce that message, reinforce that lesson, reinforce that learning. And then the other element of it is with dance classes, I'm going to get to Nick Nat's I was going to say Nick Nat's comment in a second. I'm going to scroll back up to that one. But the other element is how you're processing information is important. I'm going to go back to the dance environment because I think in academia, this is really common. Although academia is like the inverse, right? In academia, when I was in university, we always had to do summaries and notes and write an essay on this. And so we're always thinking mentally. But there are very few opportunities that I had or projects that I was presented with that said, take what you learned and how would you use it in this real life application, right? Dance, on the other hand, is the real life application. This is how I'm going to move. Got a movement, going to process it in my body and get out on the dance floor or in a class or on stage and put it into practice. And we rarely approach this physical activity in a mental way. And again, I tell you, and if you've been following these live chats, you'll see how much of the topics that we are discussing, just verbally listening, speaking, discussing, mental, like thinking about the mind state and the attitude with which we're approaching things, apply to the improvement and development of our physical dance, of our physical execution of this dance, and our ability to connect with somebody else. I always say, my dance, you can applaud the technique, you can applaud the connection, the musicality, and all of that stuff, but that is not where it started. I did not start by trying to improve the connection technically. I tried to improve the connection mentally. I tried to find my blocks. I tried to understand what brings me pleasure. How can I bring that to somebody else in a physically connected dance? And I started to adjust the physical aspects of my dance based on understanding how I'm thinking about it first. And so for me, it's 80% here, mindset, 20% execution in your body. So, in terms of how we think about dance, how many of you take notes, physical notes after a class, after a dance class? Sorry, not like a regular class or workshop. Some of you do. I know some that do. Answer it for yourself if you do or don't, or throw it into the chat. Many of us do not take notes, physical notes after a dance class. Why not? Is there a reason why? Most of the time, it's because we don't take the time to process that information that we learned about our bodies in words, in thoughts. We just execute. We passively repeat the things that we did. We try and remember the sequence or whatever that was and just do it again and again and again and hope that we get better. But if we can approach our learning as the different ways that we can engage our learning, right? Experimenting with different techniques to absorb that information and process that information, we can reinforce our understanding of it. One of those ways is taking notes, physical notes, right? Written notes or typewritten notes or whatever you want to do, whatever your preference is. But taking actual written notes of what it is that you learned about your body. Because you'll find just trying to identify it will be a challenge in itself. But if we can speak about it, why can't we write about it? I mean, when you're taking a dance class, it's not like, well, sometimes there's dance classes where you just follow along, right? The instructor's just doing something and you follow along and they don't speak and they don't actually provide instruction. But if they're able to provide their instruction in words, how come we don't take the time to process our understanding of those same movements in words? Right? That is one technique that I've used for teaching, but also when I am trying to process, especially when I have student videos, I am writing down everything that I'm learning through observation of my student. It's not just speaking about it, but I write it down because when I write it down, I don't just randomly say things. I'm trying to be as clear as possible because I'm trying to form sentences that make sense and group them together into sections. And it allows a lot more clarity in my teaching as a result. And as a student, it offers me a lot more clarity because I say, oh, okay, this is an element of balance that I'm struggling with. Or this is what I learned about footwork, and this is why it's important. And this is how, now that I start writing about it, oh my God, I can see how this would connect to this other thing that I had learned in the past. There's lots of connections that you can start to build, neural connections. You can start to build when you start to process the information that you have learned or that you have received in more than one way, in more than just the visual, watching a teacher following along, but actually verbally, possibly saying it to somebody else. Maybe you have someone who missed class. Can you teach that to somebody else? Right? Can you break it down in the same way? Can you teach it to yourself? Can you reframe and summarize the main points? Can you write out your weaknesses? Where did you struggle with it? Those questions of self-reflection that come out when it comes to note-taking or filling out feedback forms are so crucial to our growth, but it is one step that we really don't take, especially when it comes to learning dance. But it applies to anything. I mean, very rarely do we look at learning a particular subject and sit there and say, oh, maybe there's a question at the end of a project management course. How would you outline the project scope for this type of project with this many employees and whatever factors are included? Yeah, you might write that out. But do we ever stop to say, what's my weakness here? How would I deal with this and why would I deal with it that way? What if I was dealing with a different personality? How would I deal with it? Like, we don't have these probing questions. And that's what I mean by kind of passively approaching life and learning is we do the bare minimum or maybe just a little bit more. But that effort that we put in tends to be something like 10% of a 90% or 100% equation. So if we could do a little bit more, we could get much more. And that's really what today's live chat is all about, is empowering you to get the most out of your time, whatever you are doing with that time, to get the most out of it. And the only way to do that is to start to approach every learning environment, whether that is a specific classroom environment where there's a teacher involved, or whether that is life itself. Right? It's empowering you to see how many opportunities there are to learn, reflect, and grow. And ultimately, that becomes your contribution to the world, right? Maybe we're not all having platforms like this to broadcast to unlimited people, but that doesn't mean you don't make contributions in your life to the people around you. If that's your family, your friends, in terms of how you connect and communicate. And if it's on the dance floor, every dance that you're having is a contribution that you are creating and that you are giving to somebody else on the dance floor. And when you're in a classroom setting, your active participation is a contribution to the teacher and to the learning environment and to all the other students. That's why we need to invest in our growth and to be more active participants in this process, because there's always going to be a ripple effect. There's always someone who's benefiting from it, or not benefiting, but impacted by it, positively or negatively. And so what we do echoes, right? As a gladiator, right? What we do echoes in eternity, and it sure does. So why not take a more intentional approach to what we are getting out of our lives by being active in that learning process, and especially in the classroom, and not thinking that showing up is sufficient, because through this discussion alone, we know that it is not. So let me address a couple of comments, and then I'm going to go back to my outline here to address some of the other. There's actually, you know what? I'm going to get to the comments in a section, in a second. I want to actually talk about 3 more points. Or 2 more points. One is just touching on what we just said. There is one other element of learning that this kind of ties into what I was just saying before, but there's another element of learning that we're not really thinking of, because we think that there is a connection with the teacher and that's their responsibility. This is going back to the classroom environment, but where we think that the teacher is responsible for correcting us. We're not taking the approach to our learning as trying to absorb as much information and get enough knowledge to self-correct. That's where that reflection part comes in. We don't reflect enough, and we're not approaching it with trying to get the knowledge to self-correct. We're looking at external factors as being the reason and the source of our correction and the feedback. But in reality, the feedback can also come from within us if we have the ability and the desire to process, to analyze, to dissect what it is that we are doing, right? When I'm dancing, for example, when I started and, people were giving me spins and all these things, and I was losing my balance, I didn't approach it passively. I didn't look at it and say, oh, well, I lost my balance. Well, next time, I'll get it, hopefully. No, I approached it as, I lost my balance. Why do I keep tilting to the right every time? I wonder if it's because I'm not engaging my core. I started asking in that moment all of these questions to myself. Why am I losing my balance? Why am I tilted this way? Why is my angle different? Why is my connection not this or not that? Why am I stepping and slipping? All of these questions I was asking in the moment and trying to get answers to them so that I could correct it in the moment, so that the next moment would be a better moment than the one before. That's how I approach my dancing. That is how I approach my life, period. But that's definitely how I've been approaching my dancing all of these years, 20 plus years. And that's why I'm so good at adapting on the fly, because adapting on the fly and creating on the fly Like, we will be scared to create if we don't know what's going to happen and we don't know how to correct it and we don't know how to fix it. Why would we try something new if everything that's new could be a mistake and fail and just doesn't work out? But if we know that when we make a mistake, we also have the knowledge within us to analyze that mistake and figure out where we could fix it, how we could fix it, and then move forward from there and try it again and be better at it, then we are going to be more willing to make mistakes, to take those creative opportunities, to try something new, to express ourselves in the way that we feel and not the way that we've been told to do. But if we don't feel, or if we are not approaching learning as also this element of self correction, understanding the information enough to self correct, then we are going to limit our desire to express ourselves in those unique and authentic ways. So think about your own learning and how much of that dissection and analysis are you performing on your own dancing in the moments, maybe not in the classroom because there's constant flow of instruction happening there, but definitely after, in your time, in your scheduled time of reaching your goals for practice and review. How are you practicing? Right? Again, not just about showing up, but how are you showing up? So yes, you schedule time to practice, but how are you practicing? Are you just repeating, you seeing a video and just doing it over and over again? Or are you doing it one way and realizing that something didn't work and saying, why? What could what could be the reason for this? Maybe the teacher didn't provide this information, but don't you think you could also discover it yourself if you ask the right questions? And then once you have those questions, make an adjustment. Maybe you asked the wrong question to yourself, but once you make that adjustment, you'll see if your outcome is better, then you asked the right question and you answered it correctly. If your outcome is still poor, then you asked the wrong question or you answered it incorrectly. And these are those questions of self reflection that we need to constantly be employing in our lives, period, because it helps us and it helps everybody that we are interacting with. And then two last points, which is in our learning process, and not all of us have the luxury of having many sources for learning, many environments to learn. If you are in the New York or New Jersey area, this particular area is just saturated with schools and instructors. There are tons of instructors in all types of disciplines that you can go and learn from, all quality instructors as well. You're not at a shortage of where you can learn from. If you are in a small town, somewhere in the middle of nowhere, you might just have one school, if that, if you're lucky, right? So your access is one element. But when you're thinking about taking classes, right, or pursuing your goals, it's not just about saying, I want to learn dance. Or actually, let me rephrase that. Once you've started taking classes, once you've been introduced, because your introduction to it can be all over the place, but once you've been introduced, once you've got somewhat of a desire to continue it, and now you're like, oh, you know what, I want to pursue it to this end, or I want to also be able to do these things. It's important for us to be selective about our environments and our instructors, right? What is the environment within which I'm learning? What is the classroom environment? What's the vibe? Now, if you have the luxury of choosing, there's lots of options, then try to find the one that fits best with you. If you don't have the luxury, then you end up in those situations and you try to adjust your frame of mind to see how you can block out the negativity that you might be experiencing or that you don't connect with and absorb all of the things that you really do want from that location and that environment. Instructor, same thing. Not all instructors are equal. And I'm sure we all know this because we've had experience with all types of teachers in our lives. Most of you that are on here are not so young that you've never attended a class in your life. So even if it's not a dance class and it's just a university course or college course or something that you had to do with work, whatever the case is, you've had someone who's been a teacher in your life. And so you've had experiences and you know that not all instructors are created equal. I remember there were instructors who used to yell at students and really berate you. Like if you didn't get it right, they're like, "What do you think you're doing? You call yourself a dancer? You're in the wrong class. You know, you better clean up your act." And it just felt like shit. Some people thrived in that environment. They were like, "Yeah, I love that. It really pushes me and motivates me." Other people didn't. I personally, now that I know myself, again, self awareness, now that I know myself, I know that that is not an environment within which I want to be in to learn. If I have to be, well, I'll deal with it. But I probably would push back against that. But I would prefer an instructor who's a little bit more compassionate and empathetic towards my needs. The other thing is also in terms of aligning that instructor with your personality, right? So the compatibility there in how you learn, how you want to be communicated with, but also your goals. Because not all instructors are serving the same goals for you. So, for example, in my past, why does this thing keeps getting blurry? All right, there we go. For example, in my past, when 10 years ago or so, where I was still focusing on performing and really changing up my style on stage or introducing new things into that dance for performance, and I wanted it to be clean, I was taking dance classes in a lot of other disciplines. You know, I'd go to Alvin Ailey, take classes there, ballet, modern, all these things. And it aligned with my goals at that time because that's what I wanted to learn to pursue the goal of performing with different techniques, but understanding those techniques when I introduce them into my dance. Now, my goals are different. So, me taking that time, again, that limited time that we have in our lives, and now with my packed schedule of all the other things that I'm doing, I don't have as much time. For me to go and take those classes now would not make sense. Not to say that those classes aren't valuable, not to say that those teachers aren't amazing teachers, but to go and spend my time to take those classes when my pursuit is no longer that doesn't make sense. So again, back to a lot of us who are taking classes and just taking as many classes as possible. Like, are you really contributing to your learning and to your goal? Have you defined your goal? Again, have you taken the time to understand what are the steps required to it? And the steps are not just take classes, go out dancing, practice this much. No, the steps also include when, where, with whom, and why. Right? I'm going to take, I'm going to set aside this much time to take classes. What kind of classes will I take? How will they benefit the pursuit of this goal? How does that instructor align with my personality? Is this the most conducive environment for learning, or will I have to struggle because I'm going to have this conflict of personality or teaching styles and learning styles? Like, there's a lot more steps involved to maximizing your learning experience than just saying, I'm going to take classes. And then finally, and uh, and then I'm going to address a couple more points that are in the comments. Finally, pace yourself and reward yourself. This one is just as important when it comes to our learning. As students of anything, we don't know. That's why we're there. We are there to learn, to know, to understand, to improve ourselves. And sometimes in that learning process, depending on your personality, right, being aware of your own personality, if you're a perfectionist, for example, you'll just never feel like you ever got it. I am often fighting with that perfectionist inside of me who's like, yeah, it's not good enough. It's still not good enough. It's still not good enough, Magna. Yeah, it's 20 years later, it's still not. I still battle with that. So if you're dealing with something like that, there's an element of taking time to pat yourself on the back. Because I tell you, wherever you are, whatever level you're at, no matter how many mistakes you're making on the regular basis, okay, you are better than you were yesterday. You're better than you were a month ago. You are definitely better than you were a year ago. You're comparing yourself to yourself, you are better. And we need to take that time to applaud our efforts, to acknowledge our accomplishments, to reward ourselves as we are learning, because that is the motivation. Because if you feel like you are never getting better, I still suck. Like, I hear students like that, people that I've danced with who were beginners when I met them, and then they turned into advanced beginners or, beginner intermediate students, and I'm dancing with them, and I know that they're great. Actually, they've had huge strides of progress. And whenever I dance with them, the comment from their side is, "Oh, I still suck." And how can you motivate yourself to really truly approach learning if you think that no matter how much time you put in, you're getting nowhere? So take that time to reward yourself for your efforts and for your accomplishments and for your progress, because you have made some. And that goes back into reflection too. If you want, journal, every week, every month, every quarter, whatever frequency you want, but take a time to journal. Say, where am I today? And how have I grown from where I was last week or last month? Acknowledge those things, because they will help push you through those difficult times when you feel like, oh, man, I'm still stuck. And you look at those things and you say, you know what? I didn't know this before, and now I know that. It's not like I know nothing. I do know some things. There's a lot more to learn, but I still have gotten some knowledge, and I've been able to successfully apply that to the pursuit of my goals. And pace yourself, because you could go hardcore, okay, doing 10 million classes every week, dancing every single night. And if you have the resources for it and you're not drained by it, when I was in university and doing a part-time job, it was easy for me to go out dancing every single night. I was fine. But, some things did suffer. My morning classes at school did suffer because I often missed them because I was sleeping in. So as long as nothing else suffers and you have those resources, you want to go out and you have that energy, by all means, go do that. But don't feel the need to push yourself to a limit, because at some point you have diminishing returns, right? Maybe taking 3 classes a week, you really process things, you have time to ponder them, let them marinate in your mind, and then put them into application on the fourth night with a night out of dancing. But if you're taking 2 hours or 3 hours of classes 5 days a week, you're going out dancing 7 days a week, and you have a performance team which is rehearsing 3 nights a week for 4 hours each. Like, it is a lot of information. It is a lot for your body and your mind to deal with. And if you're not pacing yourself, you're sitting there thinking, look at all this time that I'm investing in this, I'm going to get better. You might not be improving at the speed that you could be if you just paced yourself a little bit better. So be mindful of that. Okay, let me get to a couple of comments here before I add. Be like Kobe, always study your game and your opponents. That's a great point. Janice from Aruba. Alvin said audio notes. That's great too. Audio notes are fantastic. I love that. Sketches. And then I believe there's also a big gap between advanced beginner and transitioning to intermediate, especially when choreography and not drills have become the focus of classes. To address that point, in terms of labels for the different levels of dancers, I would also like to address the fact that we have very different standards depending on where you are in the world. So, beginner dancer in New York, it might be much, much more skilled than a beginner dancer in some rural town in the middle of nowhere, middle of the United States. Access, all of those things factor into those situations. So I would suggest that don't think of yourself based on a label of a level. When it comes to learning, we're all beginners. Don't come into a classroom saying, I'm an advanced dancer. I'm a beginner. I'm here to learn. I am a sponge to the information that I'm about to receive. I'm not coming in here with any ego. I'm not going to walk in here feeling overly confident about my abilities. I know what I can do, but I'm here to learn how to do it better and what to find out and open the doors to what else I can do. We got to stop attaching ourselves to the labels, because I feel like the labels limit us, and the labels add that kind of inflated sense of self sometimes, or inversely damage our sense of self-esteem. Oh, you're just a beginner? Poor you. You don't know anything. Oh, you're an advanced dancer. Wow, you must know everything. And in both cases, I've danced with beginner dancers who are just amazing to dance with. And I've danced with advanced dancers where I'm like, advanced by whose standards? So just be mindful of how you approach those labels. We do get them and they're great because they applaud our efforts, but let's not put so much weight into them that they are now turning into obstacles and barriers to our learning and our personal growth. Maria Sol bought another badge. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for supporting me. Thank you for supporting the live chat. Thank you for supporting the channel. Before I address one more comment here, if you are watching this live chat as a replay, or if you're here live and you want to support the efforts of this channel, this live chat, myself, you can, simplest way, freest way is hit subscribe if you're on YouTube or if you're on Facebook or on Instagram. Like, share with your friends, especially if you found this useful. If you are feeling extra generous, you can always scroll down, and on Instagram, you can buy a badge, or on Facebook and Instagram, if you scroll into the description, you can get me a coffee, which I promise I will get a nice coffee with that gift. Also, the feedback forms, as I mentioned, the feedback forms are important for me to know how this provided value to you, what opened your eyes, what you would like me to discuss in the future, but it's also a really great way to summarize the information that you received and how are you processing this information based on the lens with which you're viewing all of this information, which is very different from where I'm coming from and very different from where everybody else here is coming from. Okay, your view, your lens is unique to you, and I would like to understand that, because that not only helps you explain to yourself and build your self-awareness, but it also helps me understand, wow, never thought about that perspective. And now you're giving me some tools with which I can move forward and continue providing value through these things, but have another lens with which I can look at the world with. Okay. And lastly, if you are interested in coaching, you can find all of that information from my website. Obviously, mindset coaching and empowerment coaching is one thing that I'm pursuing very strongly, but dance is still available as well. The Mastery of Multiples program is going to be reopened for enrollment in about a month, so keep your eye out for that. spins.magnagopal.com, or again, just go to my website, magnagopal.com, and you can see the on-demand courses and programs. Sign up for the waitlist. That will be very, very limited registration, just because of the bi-weekly coaching calls, and I do not have that much time to schedule that many calls, so it'll be very limited registration. And then finally, the Empowered with Magna podcast. If you like this live chat, if you have joined for any of them in the past, again, you know that they do go on for a longer period because there are a lot of things that I want to discuss. The Empowered with Magna audio podcast, that's available on Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. That is smaller bite-sized chunks of information on specific topics. So you can find a lot of really great information there. There's 2 episodes out already. How our yeses are parts of an assembly line, as well as understanding commitment styles with other people so that we can manage our expectations better. Again, 5 to 10-minute episodes, so much easier to absorb. And if you do check that podcast out, especially if you're on Spotify, wherever you are though, but especially if you're on Spotify, there's like polls and questions that I can include there. Please hit subscribe and leave a rating, because that helps the podcast reach more people, algorithms and whatnot. And also, of course, that's a very small way to show your gratitude for the efforts that goes into developing and maintaining a podcast. So last point here. Wade said, great value by describing the learning process from a class through writing. It is amazing. Like, just that element of trying to take the visual of what you've seen and incorporate it into words, and then rephrase it and reframe it based on your own experience and your own understanding is a skill, and it requires a great deal of mental effort. But once you process it, once you've done it, and once you start getting into the habit of it, it becomes second nature to you. And now everything that you learn is not just processed as a visual stimuli, visual information, but now it's getting processed visually. You can verbalize it. You can put it into, a sentence. And in that way, by verbalizing it, you could probably present it and break it down to somebody else. And that further reinforces your learning of that and your absorption and understanding of that material. Okay, that is all I've got for all of you today. For those of you who have stayed for the entire live chat, I appreciate it. Thank you again. Like I said, they go on for a long time, but this is one of the ways that I would like to spend my time, which is touching upon these topics, which I feel are really important. I have seen it as an obstacle to my own learning and my own growth. I have seen it as an instructor in the many students that are in my classrooms, and just kind of seeing the way they're responding or the way they're participating, or the number of people that jump at me at the end of the workshop saying, "Oh, I have a question." I'm like, that's great. Why didn't you ask that question when I asked if there are any questions? So there's so many things that I'm experiencing, and I want to share these with you as they come up in my life, because I think that they can help all of us grow and build better connections with ourselves, to understand what we're thinking, why we're thinking those things, better connections with the people around us that we're interacting with, and improve our ability to communicate. Because ultimately, that's what this is all about. Like, how do we connect with other people? We communicate. And that might be verbally, or that might be non-verbally, as we do in dance. But there are so many things that we do not take check of, right? There's so many things that we are not processing about what we're doing, why we're doing it, that we don't understand the impact it has ultimately on the people around us. And so if we can start to pursue life with this attitude of being a sponge to learning, if we can pursue life regardless of our accomplishments and all of the possessions that we have, as humbly as possible, we're going to get so much more, and we're going to be able to give that much more to those people with whom we want to build stronger connections. So again, thank you for being here. I appreciate your time. The replay will be available on YouTube. So if you're watching it on Facebook, or if you're watching it on Instagram, you can go and check it out there. Please complete the feedback form. I would very much appreciate it. And I would love to see how differently your feedback forms are completed now, especially if you have completed one in the past for a different live chat. Let's see. Let's challenge yourselves to take this environment right now as a learning environment and see how you're processing, not just absorbing, not just sitting here passively listening to what I'm saying, but to say, okay, what is an active step that I could take that would test how I have absorbed this information? The feedback form is a fantastic way to do that. So magnagopal.com/feedback will take you to the link to the feedback form for this live chat. And with that, I wish you all a lovely afternoon. It is still very early here, but it is, I don't know what is going on with the sky outside, and apologies for the lighting changes here, but it is like pitch dark in this room right now. It's 1:30 p.m. in New Jersey, pitch dark in this room. The sky is hazy. It looks apocalyptic right now. So I apologize for the lighting. I tried my best to make this as bright as possible. So the people on Facebook and Instagram, I might look like I'm in witness protection or something like that. I think Instagram, you guys got a better view this time. But thank you again for joining. Our next live chat, monthly live chat, is going to be happening usually. So far, it's been scheduled as the first Wednesday of every month at 12 p.m. That's where I go live. Again, the replays are available on YouTube. The Mpowered with Magna audio podcast is available on Spotify and all podcasting platforms. And that's it. Thank you again. Canada fires. Yes, you're right. The smoke from the Canada fires. That's what's happening outside right now. Oh, Canada. I'm Canadian too. I feel guilty and proud. I don't know. Have a lovely day, everybody. Thank you for joining. And thank you. Thank you for supporting whatever way that you do. For those of you that bought badges or give a gift and donations, thank you for that. But the fact that you are here present with me, or that you're watching this as a replay, is also support. Because if I can help in some way or another, impact your life in a positive way, that is something that you've given me indirectly, something I'll never know of, but something that you've given me in my soul as a feeling of fulfilling my purpose. So thank you for everything. I wish you all a lovely afternoon. And Deborah, let's vote for Magna as New York, New Jersey mayor in the future. I don't want to get into politics here. It is a little too crazy, American politics. That's a hard pass, for now at least. All right, folks, have a great day. And here comes the process of logging out of everything while I look confused on screen.